The peal of St. Michael's bells announced my sister Bethany's union with the flawless Julian, a sound meant to signify joy. But for me, trapped in bridesmaid satin the color of a faded bruise, it resonated with a familiar, sickening dread that coiled low in my gut. This meticulously crafted day, the culmination of Bethany's effortless radiance and seemingly boundless luck, felt less like a celebration and more like the final, tense act of a long-running family play, poised precariously, on the brink of an unexpected, perhaps catastrophic plot twist. I could almost feel the stage lights glaring, anticipating a denouement that would unravel far more than just the carefully tied satin ribbons on the floral arrangements. It wasn't just the unfortunate dress, clinging uncomfortably in the humid July air, or the cloying funereal scent of lilies choking the nave. It was Bethany. Always, inescapably, Bethany. Bethany and I were crafted from opposing elements, destined perhaps by cosmic joke to orbit the same family nucleus while forever clashing. She was the sunbeam, effortlessly golden, naturally drawing everyone into her warm sphere with an easy laugh and a perfectly timed, devastatingly effective compliment. She navigated life's complexities with an innate grace, a seemingly frictionless glide that I could only observe with a mixture of envy and resentment. I was the shadow she cast. The studious one, the quiet observer tucked into corners, the one perpetually stuck in the background, feeling clumsy, tongue-tied, and cursed to overanalyze every fleeting social interaction until it lost all meaning. Our parents, bless their well-meaning, conflict-averse hearts, had always preached fairness, meticulously dividing toys, allowances, and praise with the earnest precision of accountants balancing ledgers. But fairness felt futile, a flimsy shield against Bethany's dazzling gravitational pull. How could they not favor the daughter who charmed visiting relatives into offering unsolicited financial advice, who excelled at sports with infuriatingly little practice, and who perpetually looked as though she'd just stepped out of a glossy magazine advertisement for unattainable perfection? Growing up in our sprawling, perfectly manicured suburban Chicago home, our rivalry wasn't fought with the satisfying crash of raised voices or dramatically slammed doors. No, it was far more insidious. A subtle, persistent, low-frequency hum beneath the surface of everyday family life. It was an unspoken, relentless competition measured in achievements, accolades, and the reflected pride in our parents' eyes. She'd land the coveted lead role in the school musical, effortlessly hitting notes I practiced for weeks in the privacy of my bedroom until my throat was raw. I'd win the regional science fair, my intricate, painstakingly researched project, earning polite applause that felt strangely muted compared to the standing ovation she received for merely existing beautifully on stage. She floated through high school hallways cocooned in a laughing, impenetrable posse of friends. I clung gratefully to my small, loyal circle of fellow outsiders, finding solace in shared sarcasm and intellectual pursuits. It was a silent, exhausting, relentless game of one-upmanship, a constant, draining battle for parental pride, for a sliver of the seemingly infinite spotlight she so naturally commanded. As adolescence blurred into the sharper edges of adulthood, the stakes climbed relentlessly higher, the comparisons becoming more pointed. College acceptance letters weren't just personal triumphs. They were carefully weighed points scored on an invisible family scoreboard. First loves weren't just about giddy romance. They were about who landed the more objectively desirable, parent-approved partner. Career paths became starkly diverging roads, each milestone, or lack thereof, implicitly judged against the other's perceived trajectory of success, and, now, this. The glittering apex of her achievements, it seemed. Her perfect wedding, meticulously planned over 18 months with military precision, down to the last imported hand-selected rose petal scattering the aisle, and the groom, Julian. He was the living, breathing embodiment of everything Bethany, and by extension our parents, valued above all else. Handsome in that classic, understated, old-money way that suggested generations of good breeding and expensive dentistry. A successful pediatric surgeon, literally saving tiny, innocent lives, a fact mentioned frequently, and possessing a quiet, steady charm, almost as potent, in its own way, as Bethany's more flamboyant version. He listened intently when you spoke, his gaze focused, remembered small, insignificant details you'd mentioned weeks before, and had a slow, warm smile that seemed, on the surface, entirely genuine. My parents were utterly, completely besotted, practically vibrating with vicarious success. Bethany's friends fluttered around him like designer moths to a cashmere flame. Even my cynical, perpetually guarded heart had to concede, grudgingly, that he seemed like a genuinely good, kind, intelligent person. Seemed. That tiny, persistent seed of doubt, planted by years of observing Bethany's subtle, masterful manipulations up close, lingered stubbornly, refusing to be ignored. Could anyone truly be that flawless? Or was he simply another, albeit higher stakes prize she had effortlessly acquired? The ceremony itself passed in a surreal haze of jewel-toned light, filtering through stained glass, soaring organ music that vibrated in my bones, and the ancient, murmured vows exchanged under the watchful eyes of saints frozen in plaster. I played my part, a dutiful automaton in periwinkle. I smoothed Bethany's ridiculously long train, handed over her oversized, cascading bouquet at the precise, pre-rehearsed moment, and forced my lips into a smile that felt brittle enough to shatter, stretched painfully tight across my face. My whispered congratulations at the altar felt like swallowing shards of glass, lodging sharp and uncomfortable in my throat. But the reception, held in the opulent, almost overwhelmingly gilded grand ballroom of a swanky downtown Chicago hotel, with panoramic windows overlooking the glittering, indifferent city skyline, was where the carefully constructed facade, already showing hairline cracks, began to truly crumble. Chandeliers the size of small cars dripped crystals, casting a warm, deceptively inviting glow over tables, groaning under the weight of towering floral arrangements and gleaming, heavy silverware. The air buzzed with the determinedly cheerful hum of polite conversation, the clinking of champagne flutes, and the distant strains of a string quartet playing something vaguely classical. Yet, beneath the veneer of forced elegance and expensive celebration, the tension that had simmered between Bethany and me all day, a low electric current, began to arc and reach a dangerous boiling point. You could almost taste the unspoken, history in the air, thick and heavy as the buttercream frosting on the towering cake. The familiar, slightly jarring chime of a spoon tapping against a crystal glass cut through the murmur, a Pavlovian signal for attention, signaling the start of the obligatory toasts. My dad went first, predictably, his voice thick with easily summoned tears as he recounted Bethany's childhood triumphs, conveniently omitting any mention of her less angelic moments, and lauded Julian's impressive career and unimpeachable character. My mom followed, dabbing delicately at her eyes with an embroidered lace handkerchief, sharing saccharine, selectively edited anecdotes about Bethany learning to ride her bike, and predicting even then, with misty-eyed certainty, that her precious youngest would find her perfect Prince Charming. Then came Sarah, the maid of honor, Bethany's lifelong best friend and chief enabler since kindergarten, delivering a speech so laden with cliches, breathless superlatives, and syrupy sentiment about soulmates and destiny that it made my teeth physically ache. I took a large gulp of champagne, hoping it might numb the impending ordeal. Finally, inevitably, it was my turn. And now, a toast from the maid of honor's sister Olivia, the band leader announced with practiced enthusiasm. A spotlight abruptly found me, pinning me against the ornate damask-patterned wallpaper, like an unfortunate insect. My legs felt like lead weights encased in concrete, as I somehow pushed back my chair and navigated the treacherous space between tables. Acutely aware of the sea of expectant faces turning towards me, their expressions ranging from polite interest to vague curiosity. My heart hammered against my ribs like a frantic bird trapped in a cage, loud enough, I feared, for the microphone to pick up. I clutched the small, slightly damp note card bearing my carefully crafted, utterly dishonest speech. Innocuous words about sisterhood, shared memories, the few safe, sanitized ones I could recall, of course. Generic pride in her accomplishments, and bland, prepackaged wishes for their future happiness. It was safe, appropriate, utterly forgettable. Everything a bridesmaid's toast should be. But as my gaze landed across the room on Bethany, seated beside Julian at the head table like royalty, her face radiating a smug, almost incandescently, triumphant glow, the prepared, palatable words dissolved on my tongue like ash, the carefully constructed dam holding back years of swallowed resentment, of feeling invisible, of being the silent recipient of her subtle, cutting jokes disguised as playful teasing, it all surged upwards, hot, acidic, and unstoppable. I opened my mouth, the cool metal of the microphone a stark contrast against my suddenly feverish lips, and the carefully rehearsed Odine script vanished as if it had never existed. Instead, something raw, unfiltered, and potentially ruinous began to spill out. "Bethany," I started, my voice trembling almost imperceptibly at first, betraying the seismic storm raging inside. Wow, here we are. Quite the production. A nervous titter went through a few nearby tables, quickly stifled. "I've watched you navigate life. You've always been remarkably adept. Particularly skilled, I'd say, at getting exactly what you want, precisely when you want it. You're beautiful, undeniably talented, and possess this almost supernatural, frankly baffling ability to convince nearly everyone you meet that you're the sweetest, most genuine, most utterly harmless person on God's green earth." I paused, drawing a shaky, deliberate breath, acutely aware of the sudden, profound, and deeply uncomfortable silence that had fallen over the entire ballroom. The clinking of forks stopped midair. Conversations died instantly. Every single eye, it felt, was fixed directly on me, charged with a sudden, wary intensity. Bethany's radiant, practiced smile faltered, then curdled, replaced by a flicker of sharp confusion, quickly followed by a dangerous narrowing of her eyes. Julian, beside her, shifted slightly in his chair, his brow furrowed with an expression I couldn't quite read. Concern, puzzlement, annoyance. Across the room I saw my parents freeze, their own polite smiles evaporating like mist, their faces paling with dawning, horrified apprehension. They knew that tone in my voice. "But," I continued, the tremor in my voice now replaced by a gathering, reckless strength, fueled by decades of suppressed anger and accumulated hurt. Beneath that meticulously crafted, brilliantly maintained, perfect facade, there's a side of you that most people are fortunate enough never to witness. A side that's fiercely, relentlessly competitive, ruthlessly manipulative when necessary, and frankly, stunningly cruel. The dam hadn't just broken. It had been utterly obliterated. The truth, my unvarnished, long-suppressed truth, poured out in a scalding torrent. "You've always had this pathological, deep-seated need to be the best, Bethany. The winner. The one on top. Even if winning meant deliberately tripping up someone else. Especially if that someone else was me. Even if it meant systematically, patiently, making me feel small, inadequate, less than." The carefully chosen, wounding anecdotes I'd mentally rehearsed for my real private toast, the one I'd never deliver, now served a different, far more public purpose. I recounted, in a voice that grew steadier with each word, the time she'd accidentally spilled corrosive paint thinner, conveniently leaving the cap off right beside my project, on my meticulously constructed prize-winning potential, science fair diorama, the night before judging, feigning dramatic, tearful apologies, while I knew, with chilling certainty, she'd done it deliberately, unable to stand the thought of me winning anything. I described, in measured, almost clinical tones, how she'd systematically charmed my shy, awkward high school boyfriend, a boy I genuinely cared for, flirting outrageously and whispering calculated falsehoods until he'd awkwardly, miserably, broken up with me leaving me utterly heartbroken while she basked smugly in the perceived victory of having stolen him. I mentioned the constant, subtle, expertly aimed digs about my less glamorous, less lucrative career path compared to her finance job. The backhanded compliments, "Oh, Olivia, it's so brave of you not to care about labels," designed specifically to undermine my confidence and highlight her superiority. Each story, on its own, might seem like petty sibling squabbling, ancient history dredged up inappropriately. But woven together, delivered into the suddenly glacial, stunned silence of that opulent ballroom, they painted a stark, undeniable, and deeply unflattering portrait of calculated, casual cruelty, a lifetime spent methodically chipping away at my self-worth under the guise of sisterly affection. The silence in the room was now absolute, heavy, thick, and suffocating. You could hear the nervous swallows, the sharp intake of breaths, the almost imperceptible rustle of expensive fabric as guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, desperate to look anywhere but at the head table or at me. Bethany's face was no longer merely furious. It was a terrifying mask of incandescent rage. Her cheeks flushed a deep, blotchy, unbecoming red, her perfectly mascaraed eyes blazing with pure, unadulterated hatred. Tears welled, thick and angry, but they weren't tears of sorrow or shame or regret. They were tears of sheer, explosive fury at being so publicly, so irrevocably exposed. The carefully guarded mask had slipped, and the face beneath was contorted, with venom. "How dare you?" she hissed, the words slicing through the silence like shards of ice. She pushed her chair back so violently it scraped loudly against the polished floor as she rose slightly, leaning menacingly over the table, her knuckles white where she gripped its edge. The towering, perfectly arranged floral centerpiece wobbled precariously. "How dare you stand there and spew these vicious, pathetic lies? You're trying to ruin my wedding day, my perfect day. You're just jealous, Olivia. You've always been nothing but a bitter, pathologically jealous shrew." "Jealous?" I shot back, my own voice rising now, the last fragile vestiges of restraint snapping, the years of forced politeness incinerated in the heat of the moment. "Jealous of what, exactly, Bethany? Your uncanny ability to fake sincerity until even, you probably believe it? Your undeniable talent for manipulating everyone into adoring you, while secretly despising anyone who dares to see through your glittering empty act? Jealous of that? Is that what you think this is about?" The argument detonated, instantly and spectacularly. Decorum vanished without a trace. The elegant, expensive wedding reception instantly devolved into a raw, ugly, deeply uncomfortable spectacle. A public airing of decades of festering family grievances, resentments, and unspoken hurts.